So we'll just wait a few minutes that people will arrive, and then we can start. And I think like in the last webinar, it was quite nice that people shared in the chat like where they are from. So like if you want, you can write in the chat where you are from, so then we have a better understanding like which parts of the world we have participants. I think we'll wait like one more minute, and then we can start the session today. Right, so maybe we can start, and if some people join a bit late, that's totally fine. So good afternoon, everyone, and warmly welcome to this webinar. My name is Anne-Riikka Rantala. I'm a doctoral researcher in Tampere University, Finland, and I will be chairing this session today. So this is the second webinar in the PARNet webinar series, Meaningful Participation and Voice. When does older adults' participation become a democratic action? And this webinar is organized by the working group to Community and Place, and this is part of a cost action and funded by the European Union. And following our first session, in which we introduced a conceptual understanding of participation and civic engagement, this webinar continues the discussion by turning to a concrete place-based case. And we are very pleased to welcome our speaker today, architect Helle-Triin Hansumäe from Estonia, who will present Test Before Invest, age-friendly inclusion in a small Estonian village. And in this presentation, we will hear about an inspiring example from Joensuu village, where participatory approaches have been used to rethink public space and community participation, and to bring all the residents more meaningfully into planning processes. Before we begin, a few practical notes. So we have about an hour for this webinar, and after Helle-Triin's presentation, we have some time for questions and discussion. And in the meantime, like during the presentation, you can also use the chat to write if you have some like questions or thoughts. And this session is also recorded, so you can come back to it like also afterwards. But now, without further ado, I'm happy to hand over to Helle-Triin, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Hello, thank you. Hello, I would like to start my presentation with a video that will take you to this village, and it's a small overview of the event that we organized. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, no need to hurry.
Yes, I hope you can see it well.
Yes, we can see it. But I don't think we can hear if there is some like music.
You cannot hear it? Okay. I can do it this way that my presentation will have the link to the video, and then everyone can look it afterwards themselves, because I really don't know how to fix this thing really fast. If you cannot hear the music, it's only music, but I think it's more it's better this way, that we don't waste time.
There is also a comment from Heidi to maybe
Where
switch
can
off.
I switch? Where? For time.
Yeah, let's see. Let's see if this.
Can you hear it now?
No. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, it doesn't matter. Let's be happy that we are all here, and I will just. Can you see my presentation?
Now we're seeing the Teams. Maybe you can like re-share.
Okay, I will share again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
I hope that you will see my presentation.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So, again, my name is Eledin Hansumäe. I am a local architect, and I used to be the chief municipal architect of Tori municipality in rural Estonia. And I would like to take you to a really amazing place called Jõesuu village, and talk about the importance of age-friendly inclusion. To explore the intergenerational participation and what it can mean in practice, the intergenerational participation, I would like to share a concrete example from our Urbact e-connecting project in Tori municipality. The story itself is quite simple. We had one village, one afternoon, and very few prototypes. But it also shows how even a small and very playful experiment can become a meaningful way to involve all generations, not only the people who usually take part in public discussions. Let me start with the small place reality. Tori municipality itself is actually quite large. We have around 12,000 people, and the municipality itself is like 600 square kilometers, of course, but it's quite dispersed. We have villages, forests, rivers, bogs, but also very long distances between services. Jõesuu itself is a tiny village. We have there around 250 people, and it's in the confluence of two rivers next to a protected landscape area, and it has really beautiful nature. But it also has no shops, no schools or kindergartens, no safe walking or cycling routes to the nearest services. So if you are older and you don't drive your car anymore, or you are afraid to cycle next to the really fast road, your world becomes very small, and mobility gaps become social gaps. At the same time, like many rural areas in Europe, we have aging population. People want to remain in their homes and communities for as long as possible, understandably. But our infrastructure and our planning processes are not always designed with that in mind. So this basically becomes the resilience dimension also is important there. We are in Estonia, a small country in a very large and sometimes next to a very large and sometimes aggressive neighbor. Since the full-scale war in Ukraine, questions of security and resilience feel very concrete. Communities are dealing with compounding shocks like political tensions, economic uncertainty, and of course, climate events. And in this context, age-friendly inclusion is not just nice to have, it is part of how we build community resilience. A community where older people feel connected, informed, and are able to move around is also a community that we can react better to crises or support each other and stay, of course, psychologically healthy. I also want to bring in the psychological lens that has been very helpful for me to understand the problem or the whole theme. And that's the self-determination theory that says that human well-being and motivation are strongly linked to three basic psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy meaning that I feel that I have choice and control in my life. Competence means that I have the feeling that I can do things, I'm able to handle my daily challenges. And relatedness is the feeling that I belong and that I am connected to other people. And for me, it's very, very important that these needs are really ageless. It doesn't matter whether you are 7-year-olds or 37-year-old or 87-year-olds. We all need autonomy, competence, and relatedness, just in different forms. So if we design our streets or bus stops or benches or meeting places, and even our governance or planning processes, we have to support these needs. Because if we do support them, the participation goes up, well-being goes up, and community resilience, of course, goes up. And if we do not support these needs, then understandably people withdraw, distrust grows, and the most fragile disappear from the conversation, and that's really dangerous. In Estonia, we have a totally different, I think many of you understand, but for some people maybe it's hard to understand. We have a very specific 65 plus barrier in our region that I would like to name openly. Many of our older residents grew up during the Soviet regime, and for them participation often meant that the state already had decided and your input was never welcome and it was not needed. And this history has created learned low trust and the belief that their opinion doesn't really matter, especially in questions that are related to government or governance. And I felt it every time I had meetings with local people that usually younger or middle-aged people participated and they had their opinions, but people who were older usually didn't show up, or when they did, then they were not really participating because they had the belief that you don't want my input anyway, why should I speak up? So if we talk about age-friendly inclusion, especially in Estonia or places like that, we also have to talk about healing this legacy and changing this mentality. And not with big speeches, but with small and tangible experiences where people can actually see that when I say something, something actually changes and they are really interested in my input. And we had a really wonderful opportunity to take part in URBACT project, e-connecting. And the aim of this project was to improve sustainable mobility and revitalize small spaces. So we chose Jõesuu village as a pilot project, basically, because it has only 250 people, and we thought that it would be a really nice case study to to use afterwards as like a case study or to like a model to implement in other villages also. And this place has, as I said before, it has many challenges. It has limited services, no safe pedestrian and cyclic connections, very underused tourism potential, even though it is a very beautiful landscape and it has the rivers and everything. And it also has very few or almost none public spaces where people of different ages could naturally meet. But it also has it's also a place with very strong memories, for example, of the former collective farm period, where the community was very tight-knit and they shared very many activities. But today, this sense of community is weaker, and I could say that almost non-existent, because all the different age groups only communicate with each other. They don't talk with like different generations, and this makes this community really weak, and they don't do anything together anymore, sadly. So we asked ourselves, how can we work with this village to imagine a safer and more age-friendly public space? And how can we do it in a way that actually includes everyone, not only the most active residents? And how can we do it gently so that we can remove the prototypes or the interventions later and still respect the protected landscape? And our answer was to use a test before invest method, and we called it Joensuu Village Day. So we organized a single afternoon event in the village together with local partners. Luckily, we had the local partners where we especially looked out for different age groups. So we had young people, we had older people, and like everyone was represented. And together we turned this small public space in the center of the village into a kind of a temporary living laboratory. And the methods were really simple. We did it outside, not in a meeting room or in a classroom. As I said, there are no schools. And we had a series of small tangible prototypes and think tanks or idea nests, using temporary materials for active and passive participation. The materials were gifted by local companies, so it was really low cost. The most expensive part was, I think, live music. We had playful activities for different ages. So we had an outdoor gym, which also was given for us for this one evening, and people could like do sports. As I said before, we had live music. We had local voluntary firefighters who talked about fire safety. And so people could take part basically just by being there. And we had also memory gathering corners where we would collect local stories about the history, but also the ideas how the future should look like. So we added really simple, we used really simple and playful tools. You can see on this picture, we had these posters so that people could use the colorful stickers, and we had postcards and maps where people could draw their dangerous spots or dangerous routes. And we also had huge papers where you could draw your ideal bus stop. And it really looked like, afterwards, when you look at the video, you can see that it really looked like a village festival. And that was very intentional, because we wanted everyone to feel safe and feel welcome. And we hope that people from the apartment buildings, you can see in the background, you can see that there are like Soviet time blocks of flats. And we made the festival under the windows that they had to participate and to make them interested in this event. And I'm happy to say that out of the 250 people who lived there, 200 actually participated. So I can say that it was a success in that regard. But behind this very relaxed atmosphere was, of course, a very clear goal. We wanted to test a new method for planning public space where everyone is involved, not only the people who always come to the meetings. And we wanted to move from inviting the usual suspects to making it almost impossible not to participate. So as I said, the 200 people actually proved that it was rather hard to not participate. We also had local politicians there in these think tanks where local people could ask questions, and they had very direct dialogues with the local decision makers. So it was very, the atmosphere was very friendly, and all the discussions, to my surprise, were very, very constructive and extremely friendly and positive, because the local people saw that we actually wanted to communicate with them. We showed that we are holding our arms open and welcoming all the ideas. And the whole event was designed for different comfort levels. So as I said, that very many people were happy to participate in these structured discussions. We had 3 different think tanks with 3 different themes, like tourism and transportation, cycling paths, and so on. But some people just prefer to put like the stickers. Estonians usually don't like speaking, as I said before, because some people have the trauma and some people are just Estonians. But we mainly and some people just wanted to sit like a bit far away and just look and get a sense of everything. But all these forms, I think, are a way of participation. And importantly, at least for me, the most important part was that everyone could see and feel the solutions immediately. So they could try the bench or see where we want to put the PowerPoint in real life, not on a PowerPoint presentation in a classroom or a meeting room. And this is what we mean, or this is what I mean by test before invest, that we test the ideas quickly, rather cheaply, and collaboratively. And we learn what works and what doesn't. And after that, we can plan the permanent investments. And if we circle back to the self-determination theory, I think the US Village Day did actually all these 3 things that when we talk about autonomy, choice and agency, older residents could choose how to engage. They could decide where a bench should go. They could say this path feels unsafe and see that we actually marked it on the map. They could tell us that, no, we don't want the big structure here because it will block, for example, the view to the nice river. And for people who have lived most of their lives with this feeling that the government decides and we have to adapt, this kind of small choice is actually powerful, that this shows the people that this is actually your place and your preferences matter. And then if you talk about competence or feeling capable, often as an architect and a planner, I also do this, that we use very technical language. And this usually makes people feel extremely insecure. I'm not an expert, I can't say anything intelligent, so I'd rather stay quiet. But by using very concrete prototypes, we change the question from do you support A or B in the mobility plan to is this bench in a good place for you? Can you sit here safely, or can you walk from this place to the bus stop safely? And everyone is competent to answer the questions about their own body and daily life. So this builds a sense of competence, not only about mobility, but also participating in planning. Because my bigger idea was that after this event, we can use this method more, and we can also teach people how to participate. It's really important that not only that we know how to make these events inclusive, but also to teach people, especially older people, what participation means and how to participate and what are our hopes for their participation. And if we talk about relatedness and feeling connected, the Village Day was also designed to connect generations, because I knew beforehand that the USO Village generations, different generations, don't talk to each other, they don't do events together. So one of the ideas was to make them more interested in each other also. And we actually saw that the children were pushing their grandparents' rollators, and young parents were trying to maneuver prams around the new bus stop. And teenagers were making secretly jokes, but they were actually also testing everything. And actually the outcome was that there was dialogue between younger and older residents. And I even know that after this event, they made a Facebook group. I was really surprised that usually our villages have their Facebook groups. And after this event, they actually made a Facebook group and shared the information. So there was dialogue between younger and older residents. Young people had like stories about how mobility worked. Young people heard about the stories about collective farms and the history, and older people heard about current school transport challenges. So everyone had like the same field of information. And we as planners or architects can make generalizations from our own lives. We remember our childhood, we have our current everyday routines, but most of us have not been old yet. We don't know from our personal experience what it means to navigate a rural village with a limited physical strength or limited vision, or maybe example, a fear of falling. So to design well, we have to listen. And I think the Village Day was a way to listen in a structured but also playful way. USO experiment also connects the broader European frameworks we work every day with, planners usually. For example, the Davos Baukultur quality principles, New European Bauhaus, Beautiful Sustainable Together, and CEPTED, which is the crime prevention through environmental design. When we include all generations in shaping public space, we create environments that feel like ours, not theirs. This shared ownership often increases, most times, increases informal care and surveillance, more eyes on the streets, as Jane Jacobs used to say. And it improves perceived safety a lot. We support Baukultur by making sure that everyday spaces like bus stops or small squares are rooted in local memory and daily use, not just top-down design. And we embody the European Bauhaus idea that beauty is not only aesthetics, but also inclusion and belonging. But there is also a justice dimension. Age-friendly inclusion means not only inviting the people who are easy and comfortable to work with, which means making an effort to reach those who don't drive, don't use digital tools, don't believe their opinion matters, or simply are tired from a lifetime of participation that actually changed nothing. We worked really hard to find new ways how to invite people to events, because it's really comfortable to say, but we made a Facebook event, but we made we have like a digital newsprint that goes to your email box. And we thought for the longest time that was enough to invite people to events. But when we actually started to ask people, how do you want to get your information, we were surprised how many people actually don't use internet or don't use computers or don't have a mobile phone, especially if we talk about older people. So we have to understand that not all invitations can be via email or internet. So by designing this USO Village Day, we tried to say that older people are not a problem to be managed, but they are actually partners in shaping this whole village and even the whole municipality. And in the very end, I would like to say that firstly, small low-cost prototypes can actually change relationships, not only spaces. we invited the local young people to help us build these think tanks, and we had a really good time. We in Estonia, I think it's everywhere in Europe, we are not allowed to use this plastic plates. So when we gave them food there, we had young people who used the military's cutlery and plates, and they washed them afterwards. So young people were very hands-on, and they were really optimistic, and they really actually wanted to participate, and they felt very important. And I really enjoyed that work with them. Secondly, Test Before Invest helps us as planners to be more humble and more precise. We might think we know where a bench should go. A 2-hour experiment can show us that we were actually wrong, and it's much better to discover this with a temporary bench than with a finished concrete structure. I myself actually live in Pärnu, which is a 50,000 people city, small city, so I don't have the knowledge or the experience what it is to live in a village. So I really enjoyed this day because through them I got really valuable input what the everyday life in a village can be like for all generations. I had very interesting chats with children who had very good ideas what the playground should look like, for example, or what they actually want. And thirdly, we realized that inclusion is not a single event. It should be a practice. The Village Day was only one step. So the next step should be integrating this information into our mobility and public space plans, communicating clearly which of these ideas we can make right away and which ideas we can make in the future. And also we have to communicate if something is not implemented, because then the people can see why it's not implemented. And using this method also in the future. And I can say that after this Village Day, the info, other villages also heard that we use this method, and they started to ask for similar events. And we had a very, very interesting event in Urge village, which has even less people. And we drew maps, and we just wanted to get some information about the square they want. And it was very fun because everyone already knew that that we want their input and their information. So I think it should never be just one event. It should be like an ongoing process and a new tool how to actually get people to participate. So that's my presentation.
Thank you so much, Helle-Trine. That was super interesting and very nice presentation. Now we have a good amount of time for like questions and comments and reflections. So I'm happy to open the floor. You can, raise your hand or open your camera to ask from Helle-Trine. Or then you can also use the chat and write your question there, so I can then read those out loud. Marianne?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this presentation. It was really inspiring. I had a question regarding the tools that you use during this event, especially the maps. And I was wondering a little bit about the ability of the participants to orient themselves into space. I used it once, and I faced some difficulties for the participants to really be able to like understand where is what, and I was wondering how you managed this challenge.
It's a very good question, because we were thinking about it also before we made the event. The maps had, of course, the stickers, "You are here," but we also had 3 like this idea nests, And in every nest was one person. So from the municipality, every poster basically had one person standing next to it. So if people had questions, then there was always someone there to answer the questions. And the maps worked really well because we had like around 20 questions, and people could, with stickers, could like say what kind of solutions they wanted or write what they wanted. And I think it was easier because we had the manpower to really have people in every place so they could talk about the solutions. Otherwise, I agree that it would not have worked this well, because usually it's okay, people don't have to have the knowledge how to read maps.
Yes, thanks. Does anyone else wants to open microphone and ask questions? We also have you in the chat, but yeah, Christine. Christine, you can.
Yeah, there. I succeed. Thank you. Thank you for a very nice presentation. I was just curious to know if you know what installations, like you mentioned, a bench, a new bus stop, that have been implemented, and what were there some of these wishes from the population that were not that you were not able to meet. So it's a little, what is the scale of the ideas turning into practice? Thank you.
Again, a very good question. The smaller things we tested, and actually one thing is now ready. It got its building permit last year, was the bus station. That's really accessible, so it has different kind of seating and bicycle racks and everything. The one thing that we could not do was the bicycle lanes, and we used this event to communicate to the community why we cannot make new bike lanes connecting Jõesuu village to other villages. It's basically the question of money, because as I said before, the distances were really long, but we used this event to communicate to them, like face to face, why we cannot do it now. We got the feedback that for them, actually the bicycle lanes are the most important thing, because as I said before, the transportation connection is really poor. There are like 2 buses a day only. And not only older people, but also young mothers, for example, don't have their private cars, so they are basically cut off from shopping or from medical help or whatever, or not whatever, but all the other things. So they actually said that the bicycle would really help them, or the bicycle path would really help them. And we wrote it down, and we told them that we will do it, but not now, maybe in like 5 years. So I think it was nice that we could discuss it and open up the problem for them more. And I think the scale, it can be only small. It can't be really big, but yes, but if you cannot make like a prototype, you just have the chance to talk about or discuss about the problems, which is also, I think, a good way to use it.
Thank you.
Yes, and then Heidi.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I think I really find it fascinating to organize a participatory event as a festival. So that's what I'm taking. Thank you so much for having something that really is fun for everyone. And I very much got from your presentation. It was a lot of fun for you too, as an organizer and the professional. So I have 3 questions. Maybe you just pick one, because other people might have other questions, but I'm posing them anyway. And the first one, similarly to the one before, I would be interested to hear in which contribution you found the most, which contribution surprised you most, like you found, wow, this is something new. And I'd always also be interested in hearing how you deal with, I mean, there are a lot of ideas coming up in such events, and you can't materialize, you can't realize every idea. So what do you do with those that you can't realize? Is particularly because you said there is this kind of mistrust that my ideas don't count. Yeah, I'll leave it with these two.
I think I can answer them both. I was most surprised by the contribution of the young people, because I thought that maybe for them it's not as interesting. And I think if we talk about working together with older people, we also have to think about working together with younger people to teach them again also how to participate. And I was really surprised how motivated they were, and how inspiring this event was for them, and how constructive our discussions were, especially 13-year-old boys surprised me because they could actually understand why we're talking about, and their input was very, as I said, constructive, and that really surprised me, because I thought that we have to do everything by ourselves. But they were really motivated, and they were really proud of themselves, and they had ideas, and they even sent me emails. Like the event was 2 years ago, and they sent me even last year event that if you do something similar, then we are very happy to participate. So I think that was for me a very big surprise. And the information we got from all the people, we actually wrote it all down, and we meet every year before we make our development plans for the year. We actually meet with we have 41 villages, so of course we cannot meet with every village, but we meet, for example, in 20 centers, and we write every time all the ideas down, and we have like a file that is open to view for everyone. And then we just we keep it open, we show it, and then we discuss with ourselves and also with people what are the priorities. And every time we say that, okay, this idea is very good, but it has to wait for 10 years, because at the moment we are building very many schools, not very many, two, which is also very many. We are building schools and kindergartens, so this has to wait, but we will not forget it because we have written it down. And this way we have, like, we call it the active to-do list. So every year we have like a look through, and sometimes we also have a special person in our municipality, who a specialist who has a lookout all the time for the different kind of EU funding. And if there is, for example, some kind of funding that is good for something that is in the lower levels, we can move it up and actually do it. So I understand that it is easier in a small municipality. If we would be, for example, a city, it would be unmanageable or very hard to manage. But in a small municipality, you actually have the luxury of being a bit more open.
And then Ursula.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for this presentation. It was really fascinating to listen to you. And when listening to you, I got the impression that you do a lot in your approach. There were many components concerning cultural sensitivity, which I'm a sociologist and I work with migrant communities a lot. And there you need cultural sensitivity. You need to understand specific cultural features, because otherwise you will not be able to understand specific preferences or what autonomy means in a cultural concept, or what self-determination means in this cultural context. And you made reference to these cultural components. You made reference to the history of being raised in a communist state where you're used to have these quasi-participatory processes, but nobody listens to you anyway. So lots of these things, very, very interesting. And I think you also described for me that you created a kind of safe space where everybody can come in with his or her perception and maybe say, okay, I'm Estonian, I don't talk too much, for example, and all that is fine. All that is fine. This was my idea when I was listening to you. And my question is, was this explicitly part of your intervention planning and reflection?
Yes.
Or did this happen by accident because you are culturally sensitive as a person, and so you built in these elements? Or was it really systematically integrated?
It was systematically integrated because I had the experience that I actually wanted to work with this village before this whole event. And the first thing that happened when I went to this village town or this village, I had a meeting planned and only 5 people showed up. And when I asked about why are not more people here, why are not older people here, or why are no younger people here, they basically said that we don't. We have our small community inside the big community, and we don't talk much. And especially the people who live in the tower or the block of flats, they usually keep to themselves. And then there are young people who have moved there now, and they keep to themselves. So in the very beginning, I sensed that I have to understand these people and I have to find a way how to communicate with these people. Because before the US Village Day, I actually printed out posters and glued the posters to every entrance of every apartment building so that they can see that everyone is welcome. And I even had radio advertisements in the newspaper, in internet. So I really tried to get the info as widespread as possible. And because for me, it was very important that I reach everyone. I give everyone at least a chance to decide whether they want to participate or not. Because if I want younger people to participate, I make a Facebook event, send it out to the village Facebook group, and everyone comes and talks about. We have a village called Tammiste, where the average age is like, I think 40 or 50. Usually everyone comes and everyone talks. But if you have a village where the average age is 60, then you have to use totally different tools. So for me, this made this URBACT project actually interesting for me, because I wanted to find a way how to actually make people or ask people to participate. Because even in our legislation, in the planning documents, they say that newspaper advertisement is enough. Usually municipalities do it in the internet. It's under paywall, so you actually don't see it. So it becomes a question that it's actually not, you actually don't want people to participate. So for me, it was from the very first experience I had there, I understood that people are actually very different.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I learned a lot.
Yeah, it's great to see that there are so many questions and discussion. A few questions from the chat. So first from Trine. Did you have any challenges organizing the event? How did you convince the hesitant community members to participate?
It was very difficult, actually, because for me, another surprise was that the local people didn't understand. The very first meeting I had there during the URBACT project, the people were very pessimistic and they couldn't understand why I chose USO. They said that we are like a pointless village. Actually, the word they used was pointless, mõttetu. Why are you doing it here? There is nothing here. It's meaningless. So actually, I could see already their mentality was very negative and very pessimistic. But I saw huge potential because as an outsider, maybe I could see not their everyday problems, but I could see the potential. And the hardest part was to motivate the local people to participate and to see the potential of the village as a whole. So that was really hard, but I think after the event, everyone could see that. I also told them that the event is also to test out a new way of planning, I don't believe in that the municipality's architect in his or her own room just makes drawings and then says that this is the new reality. I don't believe in that. So it was hard, but in the end, after this first event, every other event will be, I think, easier because people already understand the quality and why it's important to do it this way. But in the very first motivation or to motivate them was really difficult.
Yeah. Christine, you can go ahead and ask.
Thank you. I was wondering if you see any traces of changed or improved social life in the village that maybe has been documented or that you're looking into.
Yes, if I remember correctly, actually they have now applied for different EU fundings for small projects. After this event, one thing we asked them was whether they want a playground in the center of the village and what kind of playground. And now we actually are going to build it. And they themselves also organized, and they are making also different kind of like small interventions. So I think that also the dialogue, it was, I think in our municipality, the dialogue is already rather good. In other places, it's not so good. But I really believe that it got a bit better, that the communication is more straightforward. And the trust maybe is better. So that's a good outcome, I think.
Yes. And then Katri.
Yes. Hello from Rauge, from small village from other side from Estonia. I just wanted to maybe point on one aspect in this communication and how to start or create connection with the community. So if you are from public sector side, then you have to somehow start this conversation, and you told that you used this like public communication tools like posters and radio, and but what about this personal contacts? Because usually in Estonian villages there are some kind of like village leaders or some key persons who have this bigger social capital, and it's just from my experience also that it's easier to start to make this like new relations or start to building these relations. It's also to use this kind of personal approach to use this, especially in very like small places, to use this sort of like like preaching actors in community. So did you had some kind of experience using this kind of let's say resources, community resources, also to improve all this intervention and to be more better in contact with community?
We actually we had this contact person, but she represented only a certain group of this village. So she represented one group of people, but somehow she herself said that the communication between, for example, younger families is non-existent. She manages the local library. We have a really small like village house and library there, and it works very well. But there are some groups of people who are not, for some reason, have not integrated yet. I wouldn't blame the village itself, but of course I used her also to talk about the event and to share flyers. I made small flyers also that I took to this library so that she could hand out. But in the very beginning, she also was very negative. So she didn't see, she was one of those people who said that, but this is a meaningless place. This is a pointless place. Why should we do it? I don't believe in this URBACT. Just give us some money and we don't need this URBACT project. So it was really, it's hard if the person you should use as this communicator is not motivated or doesn't agree or share the same values. So she did participate. In the end, she didn't come to this event. But I'm sure that she spread the word and in some ways for sure participated, but she didn't show up to the event because she still, I think to this day, fully does not agree with the way I used to make it.
Yeah, and then we have a comment and questions from Vera. Sadly, Vera needs to leave the session, but I think she can come back to the recording and hear your answer. But the comment is exciting to see how urban and regional planners pay increasing attention to the human side of urban design. Just curious if you involved other disciplines such as human behavior experts. And then there is further questions, maybe more context for my question. How did the community know that you had listened to them? What action did you perform to demonstrate that you listened attentively? Yeah. So you can maybe start. Yeah.
We sadly did not have the funds. I myself believe that really good urban design is very interdisciplinary. I think that's also a way that planning and urbanism is changing also in Estonia, that we understand the importance of different kind of specialists. I didn't have the luxury. I just had to like invent myself and trust my intuition. What was the second part of the question?
How did the community know that you had listened to them? And yeah.
Yes. We actually, throughout the project, we had like feedback events that were, of course, smaller because the event itself cost only 3,000 euros, which I think in the big picture is really small money. But after that, we had smaller meetings where we showed people what we had done. And for example, we had this bus stop. We had another meeting where we showed the drawings before it's being built. Then we had a meeting after it was opened. So we throughout the process, we always gave the feedback and asked them, okay, now we're going to make this playground. Do you agree that we do it this way? You gave us this input. Now we have changed it a bit. Do you agree that we will make it this way? And actually, I just remembered that we made another small playground after this Jõesuu event, that we got the feedback from the people that they want like this hanging system for children where they can play like small monkeys. And we actually did it because we had, as I said before, we had a lucky accident that the EU funds just became available. And we went to the community and said, do you agree that we make it now? And we could, so basically we had the luxury or the luck that right after the event, we could actually do some of these things. So we could show them right away that we listened, see, we made something. And even throughout the planning process, we talked with the people and showed them the designs and involved them as much as possible so they could actually see that if I say something, something happens. If I say something, something happens. So, because if you make only one event, then that's just theatrics. Then that will not work. It has to be like a continuous process so that the trust actually grows and they can see that it's an ongoing new method, not only one-time event.
Yes, thank you so much. And now we are coming to the end of the session so that we will keep on time and people probably have still some meetings and places to be. But thank you so much, Helle-Triin, for sharing this wonderful presentation and valuable case and your reflections with us. At the end, I would also like to still share advertising of the third webinar. So here you can see that we will continue this webinar series and discussions on 15th of July. And then we have a presentation from Maria Cheshire Allen, and she will talk about beyond recognition, layered invisibility and democratic inclusion among carers from Black, Asian and minoritized ethnic groups. Do you, Maria, want to share something from the upcoming webinar at this point?
Yeah, I think it actually follows really neatly on from this great presentation that we've had today. So I'll be talking about a specific example of working within a group, actually a sewing group of Bengali women in Wales. So I hope that that is of interest to people. But yeah, thank you very much. It's been a really fascinating discussion today, and inadvertently I think my talk hopefully in July will also add to and develop and build upon what's been discussed today.
Yes, but thank you all from my behalf from like active participation and good discussion, and if someone still wants to add something, then there is space to do it now. But if not, then I think we can close the session, and thank you all, and have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.